Shalom, my friends. Shalom, my enemies. This is your old pal, Rabbi Sol Solomon, founder and spiritual leader of Temple Sons of Bitches in Great Neck, New York. And it is a delight and a joy to bring to the neighborhood a major dude, a producer, a studio executive. He was also a radio person for a while, a theater person, film person. Let me tell you about this. He was even on Channel 68, had something else to watch besides Uncle Floyd at one point. He was a film distributor. He was a record producer in a label specializing in folk musicians like Eric Anderson and Judy Collins and Eliza Gilkison, all of whom have been on this program. And he has 6 Tony Awards, 7 Drama Desk Awards, and 5 Outer Critics Circle Awards, and he's just finished his memoir coming out on January 31st from Beaufort Books. It's Try Not to Hold It Against Me, which so many women have told me. Ladies and gentlemen, why don't you please welcome to the neighborhood, Julian Schlossberg. Shalom, Julian, hello.
Well, Saul, this is pretty exciting to listen to you. This woke me up. I'm ready now.
This is good.
I wasn't sure before, but I'm ready now.
Oh, wait till you hear me for 5 more minutes, then you'll be ready to leave. But now that we have you, and we are so thrilled and delighted, and I love, you can tell, a Jewish person with some level of success because they're surrounded by books and videotapes and media and culture. So, were you brought up with that? Were you brought up to love art and literature and music?
Yes, actually, that's a very good way of putting it. My mother was an extraordinarily intelligent woman who had graduated high school at 15, college at 19. She could have kept going if she wanted to, but my grandmother put an end to it. And my dad was a man who just loved show business with a great singing voice. And so between the intelligence and the show business love, I guess I certainly got the show business love, and I hope abyssal.
Abyssal. You know what this word means? What does that word mean? No.
Who knows?
It's the opposite of a ganze. There you go. So,
there you go.
So
well,
that
it was an interesting time, Saul, because it was a totally different world at that point, as you probably know. Even if you didn't live it, you've read about it. Movies would open downtown New York City. One theater would play a year, would not come to the neighborhoods, wouldn't go out with thousands of prints. You would just go, if you wanted to see that movie, you had to go downtown Manhattan.
That's how I saw Deep Throat. Not that. Kidding.
Well, I must say we're keeping it on a high level, and that's important, very important.
On Shabbos yet, ladies and gentlemen. So, what was the first movie that you went to see in a movie theater? That was like, you were post-silent. This would have been what, the 50s or before? When?
Not the silent period. No, it was the very first. My dad took me to see a movie with the Marx Brothers called A Night in Casablanca. I was about 4 years old. Ironically enough, Saul, and this is really talking about La Ronde, how these things happen, I ended up buying that movie. I bought the negative of A Night in Casablanca for the world when I owned a company called Castle Hill Productions. So it's funny how that, I haven't thought of that. It's funny. I don't think I put that in the book. But you have it first.
Look, it's an exclusive. We're going to knock that Tyree cop beating thing off the front page. Julian Schlossberg bought the movie that he first saw when he was 4 years old.
That's exactly right.
This is going to be all over Newsmax. But let me ask you, now you're 80 recently you turned, or not?
I didn't hear that question.
Okay, you are 80 years old, yes? You just recently turned
81. Who's counting?
Obviously, I can't count because I got it wrong. But what was the thing that made you suddenly, or not suddenly, go, you know what, I've had a life. It's time for me to recount the amazing stories I've done. What made you write the book? Classic.
Well, two things. One, of course, constantly being told after I told a story about something, you got to write a book, but you hear that all the time. The pandemic, though, said you got to write a book because I couldn't do what I love to do, which was produce. I mean, I could, but I wasn't. Let's go back. I did a play off Broadway called Mornings at 7, a beautiful play, a revival. I did it during the pandemic. I had a terrific cast: Tony Roberts, Dan Lauria, Judith Ivey, Patty McCormick. I mean, it was really terrific. And it's a great play. It won all kinds of awards. It won the Tony when it was revived.
Right.
And yet I couldn't get an audience to come in with good reviews. So I thought, I better not do this for a while until the audiences return and the pandemic calms down. What can I do? And that's when I decided to write the book.
Now, are you producing again? The pandemic is still with us, but it's not really still with us. So do you have your fingers in something?
Yes, actually, in March, we start rehearsal with Steve Guttenberg. Steve Guttenberg wrote a book called Tales from the Guttenberg Bible. And I decided he's an old friend. I said, why don't you try to adapt it to a play? And he did. And David Saint, who runs the George Street Theater in Rutherford, New Jersey, loved the play, and he's going to direct it. I'll produce it, and Steve will star with 3 or 4 other actors. And it's an incredible tale. This is a young man at 17 years old who convinces his parents he's going to go to LA to become a movie star. I mean, it's like Alice in Wonderland. He doesn't go with training. He doesn't go with contacts. He sneaks on the Paramount lot, finds an empty office, and starts working. I mean, it's an amazing story.
I mean, this is the true story of what Steve Guttenberg did. It's not a fictional.
Yes, it's not fictional at all. Thank you. A totally true story. In fact, here's a guy who ended up doing Diner, 3 Men and a Baby, Cocoon, 2 Cocoons, 5 Police Academies, a genuine movie star. And he did it on his own. It's a kind of a lovely play, and we start rehearsal, as I say, in March. We open in April.
Oh, mit Mazel. And you're hoping, how is, George Street is a regional theater. Are they seeing the audiences come back? Because regional theaters, the audience tends to be between 70 and your site. So
that's the only reason I'm doing it there. Not the only reason, but the major reason is that their audiences are very loyal. They are subscribers, and they are able to bring an audience back in. So yes, we'll start there. Also, when you play New York, you're competing against 40, 50, 60 theaters and critics who are unrelenting. So it's much better to go out of town. I take almost every play I've ever done, and I've done many, almost all of them out of town.
What was your greatest producing experience in the theater?
Anytime you work with Woody Allen and Elaine May, you're working with 2 of the great comic geniuses of our time. And then I was able once to get Mike Nichols to come in, not take credit, but try to save a play I did. So I've worked with 3 of the greats. Larry Gelbart was terrific, Arthur Penn. If you're fortunate enough to work with the finest people, hopefully your game gets a little better as well, And so I couldn't pick one thing any more than people with 8 or 10 children. They might.
I have 21 and a half children, and there's some I hate and some I love, and some their heads are still.
But we know you're a different kettle of fish. I mean, let's not kid ourselves.
I'm a whole box of herring, ladies and gentlemen. But let me ask. But it's wonderful that you, certainly as a producer, are able to name drop. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that you can say, I worked with this, and they were great, they were wonderful, but you've written a book. And a book requires actual funny or profound or moving anecdotes and stories. So tell some stories. Don't just drop a name. I remember, I'll make this quick, but Dave, the producer of the show, went to see a one-man, kind of a 2-person show with Mickey Rooney. He was at the Irish Repertory Theater off Broadway, basically doing the story of his life. And all he was doing was saying at his age, he was reading from cue cards. And then I worked with Judy Garland, and wasn't she wonderful? And then I worked with so-and-so, and you learned nothing about anything. Yeah. So with all the, I don't want to hear, I worked with they were great. Bye. Give me stories, goddammit, please.
Well, I was, I had a company called Castle Hill Productions. It was named after my last name. Schloss in German is a castle, and Berg is generally a hill or a mountain. I had left Paramount. They had the mountain, so I took the hill. And also, it was a small company. I wasn't going to start with a mountain. So I had that company, and we would go to LA every year as a convention called NAPI, the National Association of Television Program Executives.
As it happens, I'm wearing a nappy as we speak. I've had to since my 80s. Yeah.
You got a good sense of humor, Sal. I may call you after the show. Anyhow, one-man show.
I've done it. I will send you the video. It needs to be produced, maybe in George Street. We'll talk. Anyway.
So I'm out at the convention at NAPI, and two men walk in and say, "We have an Orson Welles movie that no one's seen." And I said, "Oh, you must have Chimes at Midnight." They said, "No." I said, "What's the name of it?" "We're not going to tell you." "Oh, you're not going to tell me? We just want to know if you're interested." I said, "Of course I'm interested. Listen, I have John Ford's Stagecoach. I have Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent. I've got Lubitsch's To Be or Not to Be. I'd love to have an Orson Welles film." So, okay, fade out. I go home. I forget about them. And about 2 months later, I get a call. My secretary says there's Beatrice Wells on the phone. I'll say, okay. I say, I figure it must be an actress because Gwen Wells was in Nashville as an actress, as you may remember. And it turns out it's Orson Welles' youngest daughter. And she's coming to New York and she'd like to meet with me. And so she comes to New York and she meets with me. And I'm chauvinistically enough figuring a heavy woman with a beard. And in comes a gorgeous, and I mean beautiful, woman who could be a model, and turned out she was a model. And she tells me that she owns her dad's version of Othello that no one has seen in almost 40 years. Am I interested? I said, "Are you kidding?" "Of course I'm interested." And to make a long story a little longer, I we ended up, the men who'd come to see me were attorneys. They were in Chicago, at Toddlin Town, and they had found some folks who could get involved with bringing back the music, re-recording, because the music was in terrible shape. It was shot in the late 40s after the war in Italy, so I don't have to tell you the sound was no good. Anyhow, they did their work, and they then sent me the print, and I saw that it was out of sync, but really out of sync. And so I went to get a mixer, somebody who...
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, it's really annoying, especially if it's Shakespeare, you know. So I went to the mixer in New York, who is probably the finest mixer in the business, a man named Lee Dichter, who did Mike Nichols movies, Woody Allen movies, Nora Ephron's movies, Alan Pakula, all the best. And I said to him, I really need your help. He said, "I'm booked. I can't do anything, nothing." I said, "Will you just look at it? I don't want you to do anything. I just want your advice." "Oh, okay." So I go over. The first reel of Othello is magnificent. The music, the sound, the everything, the photography. And he turns to me, and he's an artist, and he turns to me and says, "You son of a bitch." And I got him. Weekends, at night, but he did it. We put it together. We went to the Cannes Film Festival in 1992, 40 years after the movie had won the film festival in 52, but never got played. Had one run in New York City, it died, and that was the end of it. And then we brought it back for the world. It played all over. So I would say it's not the only thing I'm really proud of, but it's right up there, because that film would, perhaps without me, would have languished. Perhaps, maybe not.
I mean, at this point now, maybe with all the film restorations, that Ted Turner would have colorized it. Actually, colorized it even more. We could make him Orson from black to yellow. And we would say, well, let's make part of him pink and part of him green. Let's go really out there now. But did you? I don't remember when Orson Welles died. Did you get to meet him, or was he already gone at this point?
I never met him. I did go with Beatrice to his grave, which is in Spain. And I did visit the gravesite. We have pictures there, but I never did meet him. The irony of it was I was supposed to meet him, and we had everything arranged to meet at a restaurant called Ma Maison in L.A. with a fellow named Henry Jaglom, who was a director and who was a close friend of his. I got a call that they had to change it to Sunday night, but Sunday night I was on WMCA from 8 to midnight live. And I would go to the Cannes Film Festival and take 4 weeks off and give them 4 weeks worth of older shows or new shows that I taped before I left. So I couldn't take another week off. I mean, they were kind enough to let me have 4 weeks off. Yeah. So I had to miss Orson Welles' dinner for my radio show.
You should have put Orson on a plane and bring him back to WMCA and gone live with it. Everybody would listen.
That's right. I wish I had. That would have been something.
Were you one of the good guys, or was that not? I don't mean that.
No, I know what you mean. No, I was 74 to 80. I was there for 7 years, from 8 to midnight. Then I did WOR for a couple of years, but I had lost the excitement and the thrill of doing it as a much younger man. 20 years later, things change in your life, and.
Please, I've been doing this shit show for 20 years, and here I am. But let me ask you, though, of all the because you were interviewing some heavy-duty major people on your shows on there, on OR and WMCA, what was the best and what was the worst interview you ever had there?
Well, the worst is always, you don't want to nearly knock people.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Especially, even if they're alive, but especially if they're dead. Who cares? Dish the dirt. Who was a jerk or one monosyllabic idiot?
I'll say this. He was not a jerk. He was drunk. It was Irwin Shaw, who was a wonderful writer who wrote The Young Lions and Rich Man, Poor Man, and many things. Irwin Shaw was a huge writer. And he came into the studio drunk, and I was afraid to do the interview. But oh my God, is that you or me?
That's actually you.
Well, I'll try to get rid of it.
If it's Spielberg, tell him I'm busy. I'll call him after my show.
I hope that's not Irwin Shaw. That would be frightening.
That would be extremely.
Shut up, Schlossberg.
He's drunk dialing. That's what he's doing right now. He's like, Julian, it's me, Irwin. No,
and I have my GND on, Saul. I don't know what's going, but it's never going to stop. Oh, it did stop. All right.
No, if you're a producer, you never want this phone to stop ringing. We all know this. An actor and a producer, if the phone stops, it's like, was it Joan Rivers? She was terrified to have an empty spot in her calendar. There's even 70, 80s, if you ever saw the documentary about her. She was like, oh my God, we have to fill every single day with things, or else the phone stops ringing, you're dead.
Yeah, that's a sad problem to have. Anyhow, Irwin Shaw comes on Smashed, and I'm really quite nervous, but I go on the air with him, and he sobers up. I couldn't believe it. It was like Jekyll and Hyde. He was wildly coherent, articulate, talking away, beautifully done. Back to commercials. Yeah, you're doing fine, kid. Keep it up. What? This was really... So that was an interesting, crazy one.
And that wasn't the worst. That could not have been the worst interview because it was a wonderful interview. It was just...
No, there were, I can't say two of them. Oh, I guess they're both gone, but no, I can't do it. Anyhow, two actors did come in Smash, and I had to throw them off the air, on the air. I threw them off the air, on the air.
Were they using bad words?
No, but they were giggling and smiling and acting like high school kids, and that's generally okay with me, but... They went down to elementary, and I felt that was it. Had to stop.
Yeah, I have a no giggling policy on this program.
I think I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews, not just on the radio, but I have a show that I'm still working on called Witnesses to the 20th Century, where I've interviewed 140 of the most extraordinary people on the planet. I mean, everyone from George H.W. Bush to Sandra Day O'Connor to Bishop Tutu to Clint Eastwood. It goes on and on. It's an incredible list of people. So when you say what was the best, I can't say on the radio. And you told me not to name drop, so here I'm doing.
No, name drop with story.
You're leading me into name dropping.
I do this. No, but not name drop just to drop the name and leave.
No, I never do that.
And tell us a story. So I want to hear who was. It doesn't have to be the most famous person, but who was the funniest, or who had a great story to tell you.
Donald O'Connor, Singing in the Rain, Francis the Talking Mule, Donald O'Connor, one of the greats. At the end of the show, we did an incredible show. At the end of his interview, I said, Donald O'Connor, you've done it all. 50 years in show business. You've done it. You've been in a circus. You've been in carnivals, and then you were in movies and television and theater. Of everything you've done professionally, what would you say was the highlight of your career? He said, talking to you, Julian. And Saul, I swear to you, it was the only time in 9 years of programming that I couldn't sign off. I was laughing so hard. He had deadpanned it, and he did it knee jerk. It was so fast, you know. I guess I had really lobbed it in, but I didn't realize I had.
He took a page out of the Joe Franklin book. It's like,
Oh,
you are the best, most wonderful person in the whole world ever in the history of the universe, my friends. By the way, I am Rabbi Sol Solomon. I'm talking to the great, the one, the only, the fantastic, the Jewish Julian Schlossberg, whose book, you have to get this book. It's called Try Not to Hold It Against Me, from Beaufort Books. So tell us, please, Julian, the title itself of the book, which has a naughty connotation, but also it's probably connected to a story in there. Where did you do something as, I have to do this as a producer, I'm sorry, try not to hold it against me?
Well, yeah. Well, you are good, Saul. I'm going to do this show again if you invite me. Anyhow, what I was going to say was, there are a lot of people who are not happy with Woody Allen, and I produced all his plays. A lot of people are not happy about Harvey Weinstein. I taught him the movie business. A lot of people are not happy about a fellow named Alan Klein, who handled the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. I was a consultant for him. So I worked with controversial figures. My first real champion was Elia Kazan. Now, he named names in the McCarthy period. So I felt, there's a lot of people that I've worked with and cared for and were friends with that are controversial figures. So I thought that might be a good thing. And you said a funny thing at the beginning, and I'll tell you where it came from in my head. In the book, I explained, I called Burt Reynolds to do Sly Fox on Broadway. I didn't know him, and I left a mess. He didn't do it, by the way.
Yeah, Dreyfuss went in, Richard Dreyfuss.
Right. I called Reynolds and I left a message. Hi, Burt, this is Julian Schlossberg. I'm a New York City producer. Please don't hold it against me. So try not to hold it against me. So that's where it came from. However, in Hellzapoppin', a comics named Olson and Johnson, who made a movie, Hellzapoppin', a little fat guy who looked a lot like Lou Costello, Chick Johnson, is on the stand. And the prosecutor says, remember, anything you say can be held against you. And he jumps up and goes, Marlene Dietrich.
Yeah, see, it is a naughty little, cute little. I guess so. I get that.
But you gave it to me by saying somebody at the beginning that said that. So there you go.
So what do you say? You brought it up, which is very kind of you. So I have to kind of go there. It's like, what do you say when people say you knew, let's say, Harvey Weinstein for all these years? Had you no idea? Had you not heard the whispers? Had he never confessed to, as it were, that he had a casting couch or a casting massage table or whatever the heck it was?
He had nothing. He had nothing when I knew him. He was very successful as a rock and roll promoter in Buffalo. And he would get, if Sinatra would do 6 shows in the United States or the Rolling Stones, he'd be one of them. He was a top promoter. He came to me to learn the movie business. He knew nothing about the film business.
So at that point, he didn't have
He had a lovely girlfriend who was quite attractive and sweet. I've never seen her mentioned, and I'm not going to mention her either. But it's interesting that they never bring that up. He was
funny. To Ghislaine Maxwell and her guy.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
He was funny. He had great taste. He had a sense of humor, and he was a guy from the streets the way I was. And so it interested me to help him. And ironically enough, Saul, because my show was in New York and I was getting Jack Nicholson and Bette Davis and John Huston, getting these huge names, he said, why don't you syndicate the show and I'll sell it for you around the country? And he sold it in Boston and Buffalo and Providence and Jacksonville. He sold it all over the country. So my time with Harvey, I never in a million years would have predicted the heights he went to or the depths he sunk to. I never would have.
So here's the deal. Would you ever send him a birthday card? Or would you get in touch? Do you say, I know what everybody says, and maybe you did some terrible things, but thank you for, or it was good to mentor you back, or do you just kind of?
No, I think he would be the one. If anybody should send anyone a card, it would be he to me.
Thanking you.
Yeah, I have nothing to send him. I'm sorry and ashamed for him. And I'm sorry for him, and I'm really sorry for all the women and men, because it wasn't women just sex; it was men bullying, terrific bullying. punching his own brother. So, I mean, it's not, I punched him in the face. Terrible. So, no, I never saw anything that.
I kick. I don't. I got no power in there. Kicking my brother, I've done this a few times, I admit. But it's only in places
That's why I'm an only child.
Let me ask you, though. I don't want to believe the Woody Allen stuff. Because I've grown up loving Woody Allen, a brilliant genius, incredible movies. I'm assuming you don't buy it either.
Not absolutely don't buy 1 minute of it at all. And of course, now in truth, the only human being on the planet who knows the truth is Woody. The little girl could have been brainwashed, as many of us believe she was. So we don't know. What I do know is this. When we were casting during the summer, one of our plays that we did together, it was summertime and we were on the 10th floor, and Woody said, I can't take the elevator. He said, there could be a brownout, there could be a problem. And if there is, I'm claustrophobic and I cannot be in a space. So the idea that he took a little girl into the attic never happened, in my opinion. If you're claustrophobic, you're not going into an attic.
That's right. Yeah, all right. Tell me a Woody Allen story that is, a happy or something into the mind.
We had a lot of fun together. One dinner, he was saying something that he regretted. He told me a story that he regretted, which I don't remember. And I said, that's interesting because I don't regret anything. He said, oh, come on, Julian. Everybody regrets things. I said, no, Woody, I've made mistakes. I'm not kidding. But that's part of the mosaic of my life. Those were my mistakes, and hopefully I learn from them. I don't regret it, though. Back and forth. And finally I said, Woody, je regrette rien. Now, that means I regret nothing, but it's also what Edith Piaf said. And he knew that. And for the first time in a long time, I made him laugh.
Isn't it wonderful when you make someone like that laugh?
Well, it is, because comics don't laugh.
Yeah.
I've been lucky enough to be at a table of huge comics, some of the biggest in the business. And I'm not going to name their names. But anyhow, at the table, I was with a daughter of one of them. And we were at the kiddies table. We weren't allowed to sit at the big round table. They would tell a joke. We're screaming with laughter in the corner. Their highest accolade, no one laughed, not one comic laughed. Highest accolade was they would bang the table. That's what, if you had a good joke and they liked it, bam, 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 bam. So comics don't generally laugh. I did make Jackie Mason laugh a few times, though.
There you go. Also a fellow radio person for a long time. What did you tell to Jackie? What did you do to Jackie Mason that made him laugh? That made him so. Tell me.
Well, I'll tell you the funny thing about Jackie Mason for me. I was his manager for a while, and that's in the second book. I didn't write it in the first book. No, true. I've just written, I guess, 20 some odd chapters for the next book, because when you go on shows and you start remembering things that you forgot to write about. So I'm starting to write that. Anyhow, he comes to me. He has a movie that nobody wants. It's called The Stoolie. He stars in it with Marsha Jean Kurtz and a fellow, the guy who played the Kojak's boss, Dan somebody or other. I don't know. Even you don't know.
And I know everything. But yes.
And you know it all. So I look at the movie, and it's a sweet movie, and he can't get anybody to open it. And so I call a couple. I don't have a theater, but I'm very close to a man who owns the 68th Street Playhouse in New York City. And I tell him, this is a good movie. You don't look at it. Why aren't you taking it? I said, I'm booked. And Jackie will go on shows, et cetera, et cetera. So he opens the movie, and it gets some nice reviews, and it does some business. And then Jackie comes to me and said, you're the only one who could get it open, therefore you should be my manager. I said, that's great, except I don't know how to manage. I've never managed anyone. He said, it doesn't matter. He said, I'm not working. They banned me, because he'd done.
This is before the world according to me and all of that. This was
yes. Way before. I go back to the Punic Wars, Saul. We go back a long time. At 81, you got to go back a long time. Anyhow, I said, let me ask you a question. How did you get this movie financed? he said, well, I could only work Miami. And I had a big fan there, an older man who really liked me. And he came up to me and said to me, what do you want to do next? And he said, well, I'd like to do this movie. He says, how much will it cost? He says, I'll give you the money. And it turned out the man was Meyer Lansky.
Oh.
So Meyer Lansky financed the movie The Stoolie. Had I known that, I might not have been involved with the movie.
What, did you have to deal with the gangsters, or you were just...
No.
It's already made. You're distributing it, not that.
I didn't have to deal with anyone but Jackie, and that was difficult enough.
But when did you make Jackie laugh? You said the premise.
Well, a lot of times. I just did. Yeah. What happened was there were two deputy mayors for John Lindsay. God, I'm turning into Uncle Remus here, Saul. Anyhow, there were two deputy
played
mayors.
by Orson Welles in blackface. Yeah.
Can't say blackface. Can't do blackface. Be careful.
Anyhow, yeah. Okay.
Sid Davidoff and Dick Aurelio, they were the deputy mayors to John Lindsay. They left the organization. They took over the old Toots Shaw's restaurant and called it Jimmy's. It was a nightclub. Okay, they're going to open up, and I bunk into an old girlfriend from college who happens to be married to Sid Davidoff, who's one of the owners. What are you doing? She says, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I said, what is going on with you? So, oh, my husband's opening the restaurant and a nightclub. I said, I can get you Jackie Mason. She said, what, really? I said, yeah, see if they want him. And they called the next day, they wanted him. I booked him in there, and that started my managing career. It ended very quickly, Saul. I'll tell you why. The next thing I did was get him a place in the Pines in the Borscht Belt, up in Monticello, in that area of Liberty, Monticello. And I said, Jackie, I got you the Pines. I'm so excited. We're making triple what we made at Jimmy's. He said, what about Grossingers? I said, well, Grossingers don't want you. They didn't want you. How about the Concord? I said, listen, we've got the Pines. You want it or you don't want it. You told me you'll take any booking as long as it's not a dive. Here, I've got you this booking. He says, no, I don't think. I said, Jackie, I have just resigned, but you're getting 20%. You're getting 20%. I said, I know, but I'm giving up 20%. I said, I only have a reputation. That's all I have. You asked me to go out. I got the Pines. I'm out, and I left. And but we became friends after.
Oh, good. You got. He didn't give you the finger, and that ruined 10 more years.
That's right. Sometimes it does, but I fired actors and directors, and I still remain friendly with some, and some I didn't. So
well, we are getting extremely friendly with the delightful Julian Schlossberg, who is going to stick around, God bless you, for a little bit of a while to play a trivia game with Dave and the regular contestants on the Today Yesterday trivia show. Alas, I have to get to Temple. I'm already a little overdue there. This is Rabbi Sol Solomon. So you folks watching at home, don't go away, because obviously you want to spend some more time with this man, even though he has to be on this crappy show. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to play my outro music, and Dave will be there in 30 seconds. Start counting. You can count now.